Question that came to my mind is a question about complexity. How much of that's from the county and how much of that is FCC and SC and state waters? Yeah, and you get over here and it's FAA and FCC and. What are you doing, bro? Oh, it's going to be an exciting night.
That's pretty good.
Party's here.
That's not how we.
He's got some kind of ulterior motive, I'm sure.
Like, so he's gone here with clay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
His co-chair.
You're obligated now.
yeah. I'm not smart enough to come in
Our renter.
at the tail end.
Do it. Where we get in trouble to begin with.
I said, what? It's not. So, this doesn't even have the virus in it. I don't know. So much. She could rent her house. She does, because she's there, but now for.
Down up there.
There we go. Yeah. It's not.
I don't think any of them would, but he's had a rough year.
Yeah, I wish we could fix each other.
Oh, I know, I wish we could too. Yeah.
Yeah, I wish we could.
One guy in that section.
I'm just gonna sit out here. I don't want to have to regular version, I don't want to be shot.
And guess what?
Yeah.
They got the whole thing on film.
Someone give me 3 days.
That was pretty good.
Well, I read about it, or you brother read it to an NRA magazine, broke into a liquor store in Florida, got drunk and they found him in the alleyway when they opened up the next They're trying to get themselves out of it.
Well, I mean, I responded,
They made a mistake.
the very last one.
I don't know about the last one.
More about it.
Okay, I didn't know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get Texas. They're
We can talk about it. I wasn't gonna put it on the agenda, but I workshop.
Then I thought. Went down the street and I went over.
I thought it was a simple thing.
Oh, it's not. Not if you do it right. Not if- Is it disturbed land? Is it megawatts? Is it panels? What is it? There's a lot of ways to assess.
They
can talk
must
about
be
it.
doing something.
None of them.
Well, we didn't have one, but
None
Yeah,
of
I'm afraid
the
to
county
do that.
stuff. 2 days.
The last few years, they've been doing so much. That bothers me.
Well,
Accusing each other, misappropriating money.
what he's.
You know, that's not the goal of the meeting, they can't come up with
So,
Hundreds of, you know, $3, $4, $5, $6 million in more than that. More than religious. I couldn't get into it.
it's just one thing.
It's a lot of what we do. And I can support the government because
You want to take that one out?
I'm not.
Okay.
That's interesting.
I'm donating to have kids, we have calls, so.
With his organization, I said, I support you on something.
We're going to bring this meeting to order. January 20th meeting. We obviously have a quorum. Mr. Work is not here, but I suspect he will be. Francois? Okay, just checking. All right, thought you said you were going to be here tonight. That's fine. Okay, first one is he approved the agenda. I have a couple of suggested changes I would like to add to the agenda. And one of them is I would like to talk about some administrative items. I have 5 of those. And at the end of the presentation, Mr. Fisher has something that he would like to say. So we'll work that in also. So that's my suggested change for the agenda. Everybody's in agreement. Can I get a motion to approve?
So approved. So moved, excuse me. Second.
I got a first and a second. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? You on board, Francois? Francois, okay, thank you. Okay, first item on the agenda is the election of a chairman, vice chairman, and secretary for the term ending January 2022. Danny Kregler was the head of that committee, and I'm going to turn the meeting over to him at this time, and good luck with that.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Danny, excuse me for a minute.
Yes, Pete.
Sean, don't, because we don't have a chair now, don't you have to run it until the chair is appointed?
Technically, yes.
I thought, Cardi, didn't you always just go ahead and do everything at that point?
Yeah, I think I did, but I think we were out of order doing that. I think.
Okay.
Yeah, we were.
I would be more than happy to turn it over to Mr. Gregg.
All right, so we're calling for nominations for the chairman of the planning commission.
And Mr. Kregler was the chairman of that committee.
Okay, Mr. Krieger, would you care to give your committee's report?
The committee has recommended for secretary, Dan Cobbage, for vice chair, Steve Carpenter, for chair, Mike Moscow. That is the report of the selection committee.
Thank you, Mr. Krieger. Are there any nominations for any other officers from any other members of the planning commission? We will entertain a motion to adopt the recommendations of the committee appointed to suggest the officers for the planning commission. Is there such a motion?
Second.
Is there, who made the motion?
I don't know.
I think the first.
I'll make the motion.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries. The election is concluded. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. Thank you, Mr. Kregler and the nominating committee. Moving on. We have the, did I cover everything on that? I think I did. Okay. Review of the minutes of December the 16th workshop. Anybody got any comments, suggestion? If it looked good, if not, can I get a motion? If it's all right to me.
Mr. Chairman, I will recuse myself. I wasn't here. I was in Dallas. Lucky. Not voting.
Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, and Mr. Fisher recused himself since he was not here. All right, moving on. Before we get into some of the things that were listed on this, I have some administrative items I would like to talk about. Okay? And since y'all saw to elect me to the chairmanship again, and I'm passing out the committee assignments for a agricultural conservation residential committee. Faye will share that up again, if you would be so kind. Pete Ellie and Nathan Cowan and Francois will be on that. On the business and industrial sign committee, be Mr. Work, Steve Carpenter, Danny Kregler, and Nan Coppage. Anybody wants a copy of this, it will be laying right over here. Questions? Okay. Also, administratively, we have been having one member of the planning commission attend each board of supervisors meetings. I have made up a list here also in anticipation of tonight's meeting. Anybody that wants a list, it will be right over here also. Okay? I'll pick that up before you leave so you know what meeting you're supposed to attend. If you can't attend the meeting, have somebody take your place, please. It's up to you to coordinate that. Okay. I attended the last Board of Supervisors meeting, and there were several issues that were discussed. Predominantly, the biggest issue was the job that was auditing the county budget, and that passed with flying colors. There were several other issues that were just covered. One of the important issues was the discussion of COVID by the board and by Mr. Hobbs, who's not here tonight. And I understand there was an upswing in some of the cases. I couldn't hear everything because the sound a lot of times is pretty poor on the virtual, but it's better than it was. Other than that, there was an issue involving a private, not a private lane, but it's a county lane where the residents on that lane have been in dispute over some time on who does the maintenance and how they're going to do it. I think the county has resolved that. Anybody wants to know particulars on it? I can fill you in. Okay. Other than that, there wasn't any really pressing issues on that. Did I miss anything, Mr. Jackson?
No, I'm great.
Okay, thank you. Moving on.
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
Sometime back, we were trying to get new copies of the ordinance. We never did get that.
Yeah, okay.
If you'd be so kind, we appreciate it. Mine is really getting all marked up and everything.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
The new one is on the website. If you go to the planning at the very end, that's the most up to date. It's a PDF of
Yeah.
most up to date.
But a lot of people don't have that capability to print it out. And,
That's right.
That
I
kind of
make
stuff.
sure everybody looks.
okay, it take a couple of reams of paper. Um, One of the issues that comes up quite often, and Mr. Gregg, if you would chime in on this, is when the planning commission tries to get a consensus on certain administrative issues on how to proceed on certain items. In our planning commission bylaws, we have a specific thing in there for addressing and discussing the nominating committee for officers. Other than that, we don't have anything in there describing other administrative issues which the planning commission may wish to discuss and deal with. Is it all right, in your opinion, that the planning commission talk about administrative issues, but not issues discussing concerning the public or whatever?
Help me with the question.
Well, like tonight, there's going to be a discussion on whether we should have a meeting on February the 3rd, since there's no items on the agenda. I would like to discuss with the planning commission members to see who's on board with. They want to go ahead with the planning commission meeting on that date or to cancel it. Those are administrative issues.
You can certainly take those up at a workshop or a regular meeting. The only question is making sure that there is notice. And if you want to amend the agenda to include those items, you certainly can. Just make sure that that the record reflects that the agenda was modified, so that we can discuss those things.
Okay. Those are my administrative issues. I just didn't list each one of them separately, but I've been going down them, and that was my last one.
Okay.
And I want to be able to discuss those items that's come up in the past, like last meeting. But just for clarification, I want to get that out. So we can discuss administrative issues, but they will be reflected in the minutes of the meeting. Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, as a rule, if you know that there are going to be administrative issues you'd like to address, just make sure that those are published as agenda items.
Right.
With as much notice as you can provide.
I try to get those on there, but those are the ones that just came up and didn't have time to get this particular agenda amended at that time. So these items that need to be discussed so that we can move on with other important issues.
And then the appropriate way to do that would be to move to modify the agenda to add those things, and then you can vote. That way you're following Robert's.
Right. And if we do decide to not have a meeting on February the 3rd, we will give notice of that.
Correct.
Ms. Brooks? Okay. Moving on. Those conclude my administrative issues. Any questions, comments on those? If not, Mr. Webb has got a proposal here to add, make an amendment to the ordinance that has to do with potential accessory dwelling units. The ordinance A1 agriculture C1 conservation zones, that's where the amendment would appear. And if everybody read the information he sent out, you understand why. Mr. Webb, would you care to explain?
Well, thank you. I just want to, I mean, this is really a work session in the sense that we don't have any public, we're not really looking at a public hearing. And I think I said in my email, first I want to apologize. I thought the new board was seated tonight, so I didn't include Mr. Fisher on Friday's email, thinking that this was the new board. So I apologize for that, and I talked to Mr. Fisher today, so I did not mean to exclude him, and definitely thank him for the time that he's been here. We much appreciated. This is just something that was a recommendation of that housing study, and this is not something that's pressing that has to be, this is just the first step to talk about it. I think one of the items in the report, what I wrote is that I was a little surprised when they're called Culpeper, Orange, and I guess Fauquier, to sort of, as I said in the report, that they were like, this is by right, the second dwelling sort of on a parcel. Of course, in Madison, Madison, we do that. You can do a second dwelling provided you can assign each dwelling the minimum lot acreage. And I know we all know about that. So considering that the county's vacancy rate for rental properties is somewhere south of 0.5%. Last 3 years, new housing, single family home constructions is pretty steady, 57, 60, 59. So even though, we've had an increase in real estate, we've seen a lot of sales, there's not a lot of listings. And as I said, I didn't see a rental property in the county online. Maybe there's something in the paper, but there's not one available. The normal market, usually, 5% or so of your housing stock is usually available at any given time for rental. That's usually healthy. So less than 0.5%, that's just kind of hard to get your head around. So the idea was, after reading the report, which I thought the regional commission and the people, they interviewed me, they interviewed realtors, they looked at all this data, they really thought it was a pretty good study. This is one of the recommendations. I think the thing you have to be careful with, but I don't know if the word careful is the right word, but whenever you talk about increasing density, then you start saying, well, are we becoming more urban or whatnot? I don't really see it that way. as some of the pros and cons of ADU, right now, in order to get dwellings, you have to have the land or you have to subdivide. So to a certain degree, I think you could probably make the argument that an ADU ordinance would take some pressure off the subdivision, the traditional subdivisions that people use in order to build housing. My idea would be that if again, and we talk about this over the next few weeks and months, if there is a appetite to move forward with this, that I'm sort of, whether it is something, if there's agreement to move forward, whether it's something that's by special use or by special or by right is part of the conversation. The other things that I see is that with accessory dwellings, and what I like about Orange is they do the 800 square foot limit in 2 bedrooms. Another way you could do it is just say it has to be smaller than the primary house and it can only have 2 bedrooms. There's several different ways in which you can write it that would, basically and make sure it's an inferior property to the main house. So you're not building a 3,000 square foot house and then doing something, that is equal size, on the same lot. I don't think that's really what we're really striving here. It's really just to help provide rental properties that would, benefit the owner. A lot of times they're family members, older members of the family. I think one of the things that I would really encourage if there was if this was something that the Planning Commission and board want to move forward with, is to prevent these properties from being short-term rentals. If people are short-term rental such properties, then you really haven't solved the problem of availability of rental units. And I think in that study you can see in Madison, short-term rentals have they do a little chart. I think there's 217 that they identified in the county. I think that was the number, and it just and they went back and looked. I don't know how they did it, but you can see our growth. And I know the same thing is happening over in Page County. The short-term rentals are just the Airbnbs, the VRBOs are just going through the roof. And so in my opinion, if this was an ordinance that truly wants to address the deficit in rental properties, then prohibiting them from being short-term rentals, I think would be a good idea. Other than that, again, I was a little bit, talking to the folks, and I did make some calls and talk to someone in Fauquier, and they've been doing it. Understand, you can't do a second dwelling unless you have 50 acres, but you can do by right. You can do an ADU by right, and pretty much every zoning district. So I think again, it has to be smaller than the principal residence, and septic and all those have to be, like you have to get your health department and get the septic field, and most likely it would be on its own septic and well. It could be shared, but that's just kind of a technical thing that need to be worked out with health department.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so that's pretty much, everything's on paper there. And and again, I don't think it's something that we have to move forward with in the next month or anything. So I just want to start the conversation. And first, if you want to run me out of town for proposing it, that's fine too. But it's just a proposal to talk about.
It's fine to explore this, but you're talking about ordinance A1 and C1, okay? Currently in A1 and C1, as long as you've got 3 acres, if you've got 50 acres, you can put multiple houses on that A1, for example, or C1 right now. And there are places like that in the county currently. And, there's family members living in those additional units. So you can do it now in those zones.
Right. But if you had 3 acres in A1, you would not. Or if you had 5.5 acres in A1.
I don't know why 3 acres would be A1, but yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the idea is that you would.
Okay. So that's what you're talking about, the smaller acreage.
Right.
Okay. All right. Comments from Planning Commission? Right.
I have a couple of things. So, I hope my questions don't lead you to think how I feel, because I'm not sure how I feel. That would be news to me. One thing, you would require it to be rental in the ordinance?
I mean, just a recommendation is
You're
that,
using this as to improve our, the ability to have rental property.
right, it could not be a short-term rental.
No, I understand that, but if it's your parents, they couldn't own it. The landowner would have to own the property,
That's right.
okay, and rent it out or let them.
I mean,
Yeah.
let their family members stay there for free.
Yeah, either, anyway, they wanted to do that. Okay, that's one thing. So that also, though, leads me to wonder, since we are, two things. We're not looking to increase the density in the county necessarily. I'm not sure. I have to wrap my head around this. That's why I said I'm not sure how I feel. We have a whole lot of things on the books that do not increase, that we don't want to have because we don't want to increase the density. Let's put it bluntly. We don't want the density. We don't want to change any rules because we don't want these houses.
Who don't?
Some people don't. Well, they didn't then. The ordinance is still there. Some of these ordinances. So we didn't want the density then. I'm talking about an ordinance that's 50 years old too, and has not been really revised. So I'm thinking that maybe we need to look a little bit more, even if it's rental. I mean, I don't know that I want to make a decision like that. That's a pretty permanent thing when you put another house on your property. You know, what are you going to do with it after it's, I mean, if your parents are going to live there and then they die or gone or don't need it anymore, whatever, then you rent it to somebody else in your family. What else do you do with it?
Well, those are things that Megan's talking about working out.
Right. I
In
just
this
giving us some
proposal, it
thought.
says just be a recommendation to the board after you work out all the wrinkles.
Well, that's just that I just want you to think about all the other issues that we have with density or not. We also are, hoping to get, as soon as the grant and all gets worked out with our low income housing, which is very different, I understand, from a standalone house that a family member might be able to rent. I don't want to equate the two, except that they're both rental. I don't know how I feel, but I just want to make sure when we make this decision that we really think about various ways that we might want to look at our land right now, that in some cases, agricultural land mainly, which I want to keep farmland, but it's becoming a bit of a burden for some people. And I just think maybe would be a good time, if we're going to look at this, we look at other things too, and how we feel about that kind of thing. I don't have any answers necessarily, but I just think I would like to look at other issues combined kind of on the same area. That's my opinion.
All right,
You finished? Okay. Mr. Fisher?
yes, I support tenant houses for farms. Farms are getting smaller,
Mhm.
but, and they usually can put a house on 3 acres. I am not for doing this because I don't think we can control it. We have problems with trying to control 4-in-1 rule on the road and how many houses is down there, and then we can't control, family subdivisions as it is now. So I guess if they want to build a house, they can, because we can't, if it's for the family, we can't stop them anyway, but that's my understanding. But I don't think we should help the congestion that this will cause, and I don't think we can control it after we let the bag out of the box, so to speak.
Pete, I want to make sure that I understand, are we confusing two different things here? Because I think what Faye's talking about is a family right. I think what you're talking about is building a house for rental purpose.
Or a family.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't necessarily,
Or a family.
a family member could be.
Because in our ordinance,
Right.
it talks about building a house for your family. I want to make it clear that we're talking about building a house that you can use as a rental property that may not be family.
That's right. It could be, most likely it would be maybe family.
Such
but
as
that
for
doesn't have to
income,
be.
such as for income, extra income or whatever.
Sure,
I mean, most people that have rental places, it's an income for them.
yeah. And I think as far as density, that's always, density usually gets pushback. I would just probably say that Madison's not exactly really dense. So we probably have a pretty, about the lowest population density for the size. But, again, still, if you increase it, you increase it. But
My point is that we look at a variety of things that probably are related in some way or another.
Okay,
How do we propose to handle this challenge?
okay. Get that? Mr. Carpenter?
If we look at something like this, a kind of a word of caution, there are a large number of legacy lots in A1 in Madison that some of them are less than an acre. If we look at something like this, we better seriously consider some kind of limitation other than just saying A1.
yeah, I think if you have a grandfather lot, it would not apply. So you have a lot, an A1 lot that's 1.75 acres.
Okay, so you're not setting a minimum.
Well, yeah, I would say the
3 acres
3 and 10.
minimum.
Right.
Nothing you can do about that if it's grandfathered in?
Right. But that is a good point. I actually,
If you open the door to something like this,
No.
you have to be real specific.
Right.
It is not just A1, it's got to be a specific lot size minimum.
Right. Anybody else? If not, Faye, since you have an interest in this subject, I'm going to send that to your agriculture, conservation, and residential committee, and to study this and get with Mr. Webb and see what he has in mind, and come back with a recommendation to the planning commission on pros and cons of proceeding to look at this.
and who's on that committee again? Just
Right now on that committee is Faye's going to be chair, Pete Elliott, Nathan Cowan, and Francois. I will give you a list right here. You don't have to write it down.
each two. Okay.
All right.
And we
Anything
can
else?
get together and do something in the next few weeks.
Okay, moving on. Anything else on that issue? Okay. Next item on there is consideration of up-to-date and streamlining the wireless communication facility ordinance. It is quite lengthy. That was done, Mr. Yao, if you remember, many years ago. And I forget exactly who did that.
Before me even.
Was that before you even?
Yeah,
Well, that's further than what I thought.
Lisa Robertson was
right.
here,
Okay.
Rodney, Clay, and Kevin.
Early 2000s, 2005, 2006,
Okay.
something like that.
All right.
It looks like an ordinance from around that time, and yeah, I'll let you.
All right, that one appears to be a little outdated, as Ligon has pointed out, and probably needs to be reconsidered and streamlined or tightened up, whatever is the case. Anybody else got anything to say on that particular issue?
One thing, like Mr. Carpenter brought up, a lot of that information in there is SCC and state stuff.
State budget.
I didn't have any choice.
Right.
And I hate to say this, I believe we played it. I had an incident. I was part of writing that too. And it was very cumbersome.
Well, this particular ordinance is very cumbersome. I've gone through it and I looked at that last application and that put me to sleep. Pete?
I do got a question, Ligon, just for the sake of, I'd like to know, or I'd like to fully understand before I get into reading all this and get talking about it. If I come in today and I tell you that I want to put a tower on my property that's under a certain height, what do I have to do?
Get a building permit. I think if it's under 100 feet or under, I have to read this again, then it's not right. So if you had like if you're a radio person or people used to do the ham radios, then.
Okay, and next question I got, because I have a couple questions. So if I buy a building permit and I put a tower on my piece of property, now I start to sell people on the tower, I like to start letting them locate on the tower for money. What does that do?
Yeah, that I don't know the answer to.
I'm gonna tell you a scenario that I worried about something that's happening. And just so, you know, I think that we need to be able to look at this. We got a situation in the county where there was a subdivision. And a gentleman bought a piece of land that didn't have a right of way. And this subdivision in the deed of dedication said, you may not enter any other property from this subdivision. This guy bought a piece of property. He bought the lot next to it in the subdivision. He come in here and the county let him put the two together so he could get himself a right of way. And now he's built a tower and he's accessing that tower through that piece of property that it says, but on the deed of dedication, you cannot do that. And now he's built a tower, and I understand he's starting to sell spots off of the tower.
Yeah, that's heard something, you know, as far as his access, that's a private covenant that he is violating, I guess.
So what's
But the problem that I got and where I'm looking at, how did the county let him combine his property when the deed of dedication says he can't do it?
Yeah, I don't, I mean, was I here when this happened? I mean, I don't.
Yes.
Okay, well, as far as if he combines his property, and I tell folks this, if it's a private covenant, I mean, Sean, you can, it's legal for our ordinance to combine properties. I mean, you can vacate property lines, that's fine. If that's what he did, I think I remember talking to someone about this, and violated a private covenant, then it's up to the property owner association to, and I think I talked to some property association, they need to pursue it. We don't necessarily, when I get a vacation, that, you know, we don't go through the private covenants and read them, but if you violate it, so.
What's that? No. And the reason why I know that you can't do this, because guess what? There was another guy that had a piece of property landlocked, and I was gonna buy the lot and access it, and I took it to court, and they said, oh, no, you can't do this.
So is it possible we need to consider an ordinance amendment to private cell towers? That if they do something like it's just a thought, that they will not be able to use it for commercial purposes? Because then they have not gone and followed our wireless communication ordinance to put up the tower, and they have avoided all of that. So maybe we need to consider an amendment to the ordinance to deal with this issue. What do y'all think?
Well, I think the 100-foot tower rule, which is pretty lenient, is because people used to have radio communication into the house. So I think it's probably outdated. Just to, you know, I don't think that many people put 100-foot towers up with their property ever. So you could probably make the new ordinance, you know, anything over 50 feet. I mean, I don't know, would have to come to the county.
When you get to the top of the mountain, 100 foot is a long ways up.
Yeah, right. Sure. I mean, my reading through this, I did get some feedback about the few items in the in this ordinance that have been sort of nullified through the state code the last few years. So there's several sections. And I always point out in Luray, the cell tower ordinance says cell tower by special use permit. Now, I'm not saying we just do that. I mean, that's literally all it says. Is maybe try to find an ordinance that is more scaled down. I think and I've said this before, I think the balloon test, those items are important and we want that. But I think we're making that, you know, we're making it harder on us and the applicants that come forward with these, I mean, this is 14 pages. I mean, granted,
We're just
the font
talking
is.
about these commercial ones now, right? Not what people.
Yeah, I mean, we could, if we made a new ordinance, and I mean, any tower over 50 feet, you could say needs a special use permit or needs to come to the county. I mean, I don't think there are many people. I think the reason 100 feet or lower is a thing was because people used to actually put towers up for radios and people just don't do that anymore, as far as I'm aware of. So, I mean, I would be fine with saying anything over 50 feet needs a special use permit.
That's a thought.
Well, the other thing is that it ain't so much the tower is, but now he's starting to sell spots on it and let people relocate on it and he makes it.
It's a business.
And it's a business, I mean, and she's paying taxes on those people, or, you know, what's happening.
Well, if it's a less than 100 foot or less, then look at this, I guess I'd be forced to read all of this, but I don't think,
Okay.
I don't think he's violating anything, but,
Permitted use.
Anybody else on the planning commission? Any thoughts on this? Mr. Carpenter, Steve?
I would like, before we start looking at rewriting this, what portions are now inconsistent with the state code? I mean, you mentioned that, and I'm kind of.
yeah, just got this,
Before we get into all that, perhaps we could be here all night talking about that stuff. What I would like to do is go ahead, since Mr. Work is not here, we hadn't heard from him. He's not here to protect himself. And he's now going to be the chairman of the Business and Industrial Design Committee, which I think this follows under. I will ask him and his committee to take this project up to review these and put them in compliance with the state code and get with Mr. Webb and see what we can come up with recommendations for the Board of Supervisors. And at the same time, address Pete Elliott's concern that he's brought up. So how's that sound, everybody? Okay, then that's what we will do, and we'll move on from that. And during the process, all these questions will be answered. So, okay. All right. Moving right along. One of the items on here is review of the VDOT and Virginia Department of Health approval, SUP, which is covered in Article 14. This issue comes up quite often. It goes back all the way. I have minutes from meetings that go back to sometime in, what was it? 2018, okay? I think it's what it was, 2017, this issue came up. And it has not been resolved to date. It came up in our last meeting where the gentleman was trying to rehab that old house down there on 29, and he needed VDOT and Health Department approval, okay? And we were saying, well, that's what the ordinance calls for. Well, he was just asking for a special use permit. He was not asking for a building permit per se. Now, on the building permits, if I read the ordinance correctly, in the building part of it, it says you've got to have VDOT and Health Department approval. But under a special use permit, in the ordinance, I don't see that. Maybe I'm missing something. So I think to avoid confusion in the future, perhaps we ought to consider amending the ordinance under the SUP part to also require that they have Health Department and VDOT approval. And that will put this issue to rest once and for all. Now, having said that, if we do that, it's still up to the Board of Supervisors that they can override that and make a recommendation that, you know, to push it down the line or whatever until if there's a building permit involved in it later on, then it's covered at that point. Okay, that type of deal. If it's not, there are some things that come before the county that require special use permits, but not building permits. So then the Health Department and VDOT issue would be covered at that point, and it would eliminate the confusion, I think, that exists at this time. Any comments on that?
Yeah, I think it's very important that we be consistent, that we don't get confused with things. What the Board of Supervisors does, we can't control. What we can control is what?
Right.
I agree with you.
My opinion on this is, of course, you figured I had one. My opinion on this is, you know, I think what this commission and the board did the other night was a good thing. I don't think we want to tie our hands to where we don't have an opportunity to work with someone. I understand very clearly, you know, what we need to have someone to move forward. But at the same time, if we put something there in place that where it says, you've got to have this, it doesn't give us an opportunity. If a guy's already spent a bundle of money, his money is going out because he's already borrowed the money and he's held up for another 30 or 60 days because he can't move forward. Because of that, we still got a recourse to where he can't do nothing until Ligon gives him a building permit. So his hands are still tied. I don't say this should be in every case, but I don't think we should cut our throats to say we can't do it at all, because there are situations that this definitely could apply to where we could help somebody moving forward and not make them wait another 60 or 90 days, because the health department can do that to you in a minute.
Yeah, and I will say, Mr. Dwyer, just for information, couple, I guess it was Thursday, his engineer got the, traffic counts and everything. Low volume commercial interest is what VDOT will accept there. So, I mean, within a week, we had it all worked out. And if we, it's good, I think, I agree with Pete, if that wasn't the case, then he would have had to wait another 30 days. It's a case-by-case basis. I mean, there could be a compelling reason to delay one because we don't have enough information or the project's a lot larger. I think in that case, it was pretty straightforward. He just sent all the information, traffic counts, and the engineer's recommendation, and they concurred, and it's done.
Well, I think this problem, not to interrupt you, but
Yeah,
I think
sure.
this probably arises more in special use permits than it does in buildings. When you gotta do a building, it's a whole nother situation. And I just wouldn't wanna see us put something in the ordinance where we can't work with people.
What I would be recommending is under the special use process where it was not going to involve a building permit, that's when it would be applicable if the health department VDOT approval would be required then. But if a building permit is going to be required later on, then it would fall down to that step. Does that sound reasonable?
You can put the part in there, if a building, because most of the time when they're getting a special use permit, it's for a building.
What would be an example of when they would be requesting it and not be getting a building permit?
Well, we have,
In that situations.
For what?
Me,
To do what?
when I bought the cattle company, which is another one that you're all gonna start seeing more of. There are lots of existing, special use permits, and the tradition at that time was to give them to the property owner. There was no change of use. I still had to go and get health and highway approval for no change in use, just to go through the process where I did have my thing out there, contingent upon this commission making action,
Proven especially.
proving it. That was completely unnecessary. There's several of those that are out there that will be coming back up. I tend to agree with them that it does tie your hands in some cases where there is no change of use. It's just change of ownership of the special use program based on traditions of the past. I'm not saying it's wrong, but that's what it is.
And have we changed that though, Mia, where, it's, I'm thinking like Anytime Fitness. Did we change, they were putting another business in the business, and they had to come in, and we all went, gosh, this is ridiculous. So didn't we change it after that?
so if the special use permit goes with the property, then it would not be an issue.
Exactly.
And when they come in and ask for a special use permit in the future, then I think we brought that up, on which way it should go. Is it just gonna go with the owner of the property, or is it gonna go with the property? And I think when with the Crest Array, that went with the property,
Sure.
I think, to avoid that issue in the future. So I think they're,
We've been doing a lot of the property, we did it at your children. We approved that, it was with the property, not the.
There, and I completely think that is 100% right in 99% of the cases. 99% of the cases. But there are a lot of outstanding special use permits that are sitting out there that did go with the owner of the land. So you're gonna tie those people's hands moving forward for the transferability of those businesses and different uses.
Well, I caution, one thing is that, we went down this road with the Wheeling property, and DEQ, and transportation, and it went on and on. I mean, above the transportation, went on and on and on. It's hard just to have a cookie cutter for every case. I think you say that we're gonna tie the hands, but if somebody came in here and told me I'm gonna be doing exactly the same thing I've been doing. Then, and with the property, I think that this board should be able to approve that. But a lot of these cases, it gets very complicated on, if we put 60 apartments out here at Food Line, I'm not sure that we don't wanna go through the whole process of doing it right.
Okay,
I think that's what Pete was saying. You got a development like Wheeling, and it's a different situation than Mr. Dwyer.
so do we need clarification or not? We're going to argue about this issue in the future. We have been told that before we issue special use permits, when health department and VDOT approval is required, that we should not recommend them without having
Was
that
it
approval.
special use permits or site plan?
No, those are special use permits.
Couldn't get clarity from the board pretty promptly.
All right, takes care of that issue.
No problem.
That's what I'm looking for. Okay, so we won't have to beat that issue up in the future. I'll make a note of that.
Who is attending our next meeting?
That's February.
26.
The gentleman sitting back there.
Correct.
He's not gonna know what you're talking
He'll soon find out. Okay. We have, Mr. Webb says there is nothing for the Board of Supervisors in cases coming up for the February 3rd meeting. That is a joint meeting with the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission. So there would be no cases to make recommendations on from the Planning Commission and nothing for the board to review. And did you say that the board has canceled their meeting?
I'm not sure. I mean, I don't guess they're going to meet if we don't need, if the planning commission's not meeting. Right, I mean,
We have not taken any action as of.
right, I mean, unless they have something else they want to meet about. You get,
We probably are not going to.
the board,
Not made enough.
yeah, you're not lacking meetings, that's for sure.
So.
We could, if we're going to do these committee meetings, probably want to do them for the next work session in February. So, we could,
It would be good if the committees would move on.
we could meet.
Yeah. Okay, so you're not sure, Wayne?
I doubt we're gonna have a meeting if you all cancel.
Oh, we cancel?
If you all cancel, chances are probably not going to.
Okay. Since we now can vote on administrative issues without confusion, who's in favor of canceling the next meeting? Because we don't have any cases. We could always come and beat all these other issues up some more. So can I get a show of hands?
There won't be no fun then because Mike will be gone.
I don't know.
Wait a minute, I know I'm not gonna be here, but if you wanna have the committees,
Mhm,
you still gotta formally meet.
that's correct.
So you can't just, I'm confused with what you wanna vote on. Or you wanna have, I
To
agree.
cancel the meeting for February the 3rd, for the Planning Commission, since there's no cases on the agenda. And the committees haven't met to work out some of these issues to discuss by that time, I don't think.
I would force the committees to be in here. That's what I would do to drive, I mean, you just talked about a couple of very important things.
Okay,
I'd give them a form, one could meet over here and one could meet over there, but they meet.
is that a motion, Mr. Fisher, that the Planning Commission meet on
Well,
that
they,
day?
well, they will cuss me anyway, don't make, yes, I'll make that motion.
Okay. Can I get a second? Meet on February 3rd to discuss some of these
I'll
other
second
issues.
it.
All right, I got a first and a
I think it's a
second.
good
All in
idea.
favor?
Make it a workshop meeting.
Workshop meeting, that's fine. You can always do that. All right?
Aye.
I got 4 votes.
Aye.
Okay.
So it'll be a workshop meeting just for the planning commission on the 3rd. We'll talk about a couple of these things. The board does not have to have a
That's
meeting.
what the planning commission would be.
Okay,
planning on
so
doing.
we'll just make it a workshop.
Just for the committees, just for the 2 committees, workshop for them. That's what you were talking about, correct?
Mhm.
Nothing else.
Okay. Well, then, since everybody is on those committees, so everybody will be here.
So what
Except I'm not on the committees.
What do we have 2 committees,
I have a problem.
what do we have 2 committees for?
You got one for the, housing, and one for the cell tower.
PlayStation's gonna take care of it.
No, that's
No, that's the special
That's another issue.
use. We'll talk about it at our next meeting.
Okay, all right, I'm fine.
So we will meet on February the 3rd, at 7 o'clock. That's,
6:30, workshop meeting.
we will have to contact the Eagle to change that time.
May I say something?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm just concerned about how we meet. I mean, I've got 4 members. And I can set up a virtual meeting myself for my committee at some other time, if that's needed. But we couldn't have 2 virtual meetings going on at the same time if we needed to do that for somebody who might not. I don't know if all my committee could be here. I mean,
Well, you're the chairman, you set the meetings, see who shows
well,
up.
you're setting the meeting for me, so I don't know if they can come or not, and if they can't come,
We were already scheduled to have a meeting on that date.
but we have a virtual opportunity.
Yeah, I would just say if we're gonna have the whole planning commission here, then we'll just have a workshop. I mean, there is no committees.
That's what was suggested, and that's what.
Right, so just tell the committees, hold off.
Make the agenda those two.
We'll just talk about these 2 things.
So any preparation work that you can
Let me just
do.
make sure, so I'm prepared. So for the what this committee is supposed to work on, my committee, you all will discuss it? Or will not worry about those people who can't be here that need to be virtual?
They are members of the planning commission and they are supposed to be here. If they're here virtually, fine.
It doesn't make sense.
What
I don't
Faye's,
understand.
what Faye's concern is, you have 4 or 5 people on virtual. You got 2 committees. How are they gonna interact with each other?
Well, what I just understood him to say is we all gonna talk about one thing and then we all gonna talk about the other. It's
That's
no
what I'm
committee
saying.
meeting. It's a workshop meeting where we all can join in the discussion, whatever we're talking about.
That's the clarification I want.
So if it's on virtual, it's okay.
Yep.
That's not what I asked.
Well, yeah, if we all talk, that was my clarification.
It's gonna be a regular workshop meeting.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
That's not what the motion was, and that's not what we voted on. We voted on individual committee meetings. Now, if you're gonna change it, then we have to go back and.
Dan?
I think Danny's correct that the motion was that we have 2 committee meetings at the same time. And like in
Okay.
one part room or the other.
Right.
And you can tell what his motion was.
My apologies, Mr. Quigley. Thank you very much for setting it straight. Okay. Can I get a motion that we should have a workshop meeting at 6:30 on February the 3rd to discuss some of these items of interest? That's been signed to the committees.
Mr. Chairman,
What are you gonna do?
I believe there was a motion, and was there a second on Mr. Quigley's motion?
Yes, Mike made the motion.
We voted on it.
We voted
Yes, there
on it.
was a vote.
And it
Yes.
carried, so we
Yes.
need to
So
rescind
you
that
rescind
one.
that vote.
Okay. Do we need a motion to rescind that vote?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, make your motion.
Can I get a motion to rescind the last vote to have a committee meeting on the 3rd?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, that's rescinded. Now,
Vote with me.
I don't get to the point I won't care.
swear Mike out. Okay, now, since we're gonna have a regular workshop meeting at 6:30, okay, on the 3rd is the proposed, if I can get a motion on that. We're already having a meeting. I don't know whether we need a motion or not. We're just having our meeting on that date.
We're gonna do it 6:30 though.
So we're just changing the time to 6:30. So
Okay.
we don't need a motion because it's already scheduled.
So it can be, it's not just gonna be these 2 items, it can be anything
It
we
can
wanna
be
bring up. as
other
an
things
agenda.
also. These are the main items that I
Okay.
wish to
Yeah,
discuss.
okay, gotcha. And-
These are the items on the agenda right
That will be on the agenda for that workshop.
Mr. Chairman, I have another question, just
Yes,
for my own sanity. Okay, if it were when you're discussing the item that my committee is supposed to work on, will you be running the meeting though?
Yes, I will.
Okay. I mean, for that part of it.
Yes, I will.
So, okay.
Okay,
Because it makes a difference if I'm going to be running
Hmm.
that part of the discussion.
that's my plan.
I'll still bring it up.
That's my plan. Okay. Now we got that straightened out. Okay, and everybody's probably seen the notice out on the board there that they are going to revamp this administration hearing room. And starting, was it March? I think is when it will no longer be available. We'll be meeting at other locations and we will be advised as to where those locations will be. I'm assuming that we will be able to, if necessary, have virtual meetings at that time. There won't be any change. We will conduct the meetings as we always have, it seems to me. If things change, you will be notified. Right now, starting in March, is my understanding, if I read the schedule right, we will be meeting someplace else. Someplace to be determined in the future. One of the places was the War Memorial, was it War Memorial Courthouse down the street? Okay. But not sure, haven't been notified for the next meeting. I'm sure someone will let us know and you will be notified. We all will be notified.
You tasked Ligon with trying to find the space for the workshop.
Jack has already tested on that. Is that correct? Jack Hobbs has already asked you to do that.
Well, I mean, my understanding is that we're going to use the War Memorial Auditorium. That will be the regular meeting spot for everything.
Okay, we have not been notified of that.
I was just told like this afternoon because I finally asked.
All right.
So
Everybody know where that is? I've never been down there before.
Is that the upstairs room?
It's downstairs, if I understand.
General District Court.
I was gonna say, that's not set up for meetings very well. Are you gonna be reconfiguring that or?
No,
Okay.
everybody, be comfortable. It's only a couple months. It's gonna be better in here when we're done. Where we're at.
Great.
It does have 2 tables plus a 3rd table in the adjoining conference room where those people need tables.
That's gonna be the general district court.
Right
They put
across,
some horns on, you can sit in the judge's seat.
the entrance is right across. from the
No, you can't, yeah.
Oh. Maybe post a few signs that evening.
oh yeah, sure.
You'll wind up on YouTube.
All right, that is everything. Anybody else got anything they want to discuss tonight? Nothing else on the agenda other than one more thing? Okay. Faye and Pete have been reinstated to serve another 4 years. Pete. Pete.
Correct.
Pete, I saw that. Not Peter.
Never again, I'm sorry.
Okay. This is Mr. Cowan will be showing up at our next meeting. He's our new member. Okay. Mr. Fisher is leaving. I would like to do a little recognition for his outstanding service to the Planning Commission. He's never received an award before. All the years.
For anything.
He has given a lot of them out. But Fisher, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Hold on,
Fisher.
hold on. Hold
Sure.
on, do it again. Sorry, my bad. Please, when we go.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, thanks.
Front page.
Thank you.
It's presented to Charles Michael Fisher, you spelled my name right, in recognition and appreciation of your 5 years of service to the Madison County Planning Commission. Thank you.
My pleasure, Mike. I know you've been doing a lot of double duty recently with the American Legion and this and a handful.
So where's the card?
I just have a few words that I'd like to say. Thank you for letting me say them. 5 years ago, I came to the Planning Commission to serve the county of Madison. I asked the supervisor, the late Bill Campbell, what he thought about me doing that, and he said, he thought about it a minute. He said, well, if you come prepared, Bill was always prepared. He said from day one, including the interview, come to the meetings, know what the comp plan is. I didn't know what that was at the time, but I did by the time I interviewed. Know the ordinances best as you can, and at that time, we were working on something called a primitive campground. And we were probably still talking about it. Get out and explore the county, he said. When you get a subdivision or variance or site plan, don't be the first time you talk about that would be at a meeting. He said, go out there, get your shoes muddy, walk around and see what's going on. Know what you're talking about and voice your opinion, which I have tried to do. 2 people told me that the job would be a piece of cake. Phil Brockman and Mr. Krill. Loud pants on top. But the first thing we did was we had subcommittee meetings at home then. I had one at his house, and I got tasked to do a whole lot of things on it. I realized that was a huge lot. Thanks, Dan.
You're welcome. You've done an excellent
Before the
job.
lawyers got hold to it, we had a lot of fun at different houses. Had a committee meeting down at the pond. It used to be Ken Walk, now it's Presserade. But then we had to make them public and had people come. I remember having a solo meeting, and he's a late member of the county, but he did all the talking and the committee did very little. So you can guess who that is. So I thought that took some of the fun out of being on this commission. In that regards, I'd like to let the planning commission and then you guys as the planners, you set your agenda, you do your thinking, and don't let anyone think for you. You are the advisor to the Board of Supervisors of Madison County. That's what you should do. Set your own agenda and advise. And they won't always like it, but you give them the advice the best of your ability. We have some big issues coming up. Out of control noise on 10 acres. Mr. Webb informs us we got a lot of this people interested in glamping coming up. Glamping and having music. That's going to be an issue for this commission. The 4-in-1 rule, I think you might want to look at changing it to the 2-in-1 rule. Since we have no power to stop family subdivisions. I went down Willis Ford Road the other day. Or you can go down Buggy Lane. This is, which not everybody goes down, but anyway, Willis Ford Lane, when I came back here in 1995, had 5 houses on it. It now has 15. Now, I don't care if it's a state road, I don't care what it is, it will cause problems. You just keep on, and that's why I was against the night. Keep on, people living closer and closer together. So we're having a huge issue up next to Surrey, fighting over gravel. So that's a private road, but it's an issue. I haven't been able to figure out tax base when no one wants to have anything. Not on 29, not out in the country, not out on 750 acres, not on, they don't want a tower, they don't want nothing. Not in my neck of the woods. I'm leaving the planning commission to do some travel if the new administration lets me do that. I hope they do. I'm also leaving because I haven't figured out why we went from 100 acres for a venue to 10. And I think that's a problem for this county. I want to thank everyone who supported me for the last 5 years. Special thanks to Pete Elliott for keeping me informed on the hidden agendas from time to time. Coach, I'd like to say that you did a fantastic job. It took us several years, the two Mikes and you, for the solar ordinance. And I guess that's why they keep picking on you to be a committee chair, because you never gave up. Mike Snyder for taking page 4 of the Madison Eagle seriously. Don't give up the fight. And that's all I got to say about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Anybody else?
Okay, Mike.
I just want to echo that Mike has done a lot, I think, with the solar, the committees, the comp plan. You put in a lot of time, a lot of meetings, and we appreciate what you've done.
You're probably the only person that ever listened to anything that Bill Campbell said.
Be prepared. God rest his soul.
They listen to it.
Hey,
And I'd like to say that for Mike, and sometimes you annoy me very much.
you're not the only one.
That was my job.
Yes, I know. But having been, of course, a teacher, which Clay likes to refer to, and I'm trying really hard to keep my hand down tonight. That's the other people doing it too. But I taught kids that when they were Steve, you'll appreciate this too. Anybody's been a teacher, man. Diversity is always good. Challenge is always good, even if it's from a little kid. It always makes you think, and you ought to always listen. So when you have to start listening to adults who are your peers, you need to listen. And even Bill, as annoying as he could be, because he's so, he always had something to say that I should have listened to and did listen to, and had to figure out what was going on. And frequently it was really true what he was saying, or it was something we needed to hear. So I think that's true with everybody. I can think of a few others that I've met. Many of them are now gone, and some of them are still around. That's fine, but I do appreciate it. And if I'm challenged, that just makes me think a little harder and makes me think a little differently. And if I can't defend it, then it's not worth defending. It's not worth having, and we need to look differently. And I'm a big thing for compromise, or for figuring out what we need. I want to know it all before we decide. And Mike, you were good at that, asking those hard questions. And I appreciate it. Never got angry, really, even though you annoyed me. No, you really didn't. I'm really grateful for that. Same thing with Pete. I was telling the other night, Pete, the same thing. Pete will bring up something and you think, oh gosh, why do we have to? Oh no, you better listen. He's got that historical perspective that we need to hear. And I think that's just so important. So thank you very much, Mike. We'll miss you.
Anybody else?
I'd like to make the motion to adjourn.
Before you do that, again, I'd like to thank you for helping me out. You work down at the Legion, all that kind of stuff for the community. Appreciate it. And helping put out the flags every couple months. Okay. Can I get a motion? Anybody else got anything to say? Not, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
He's already beaten.
You second?
Second.
You want to make a motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Francois, you still there? Francois? Okay, good night. Okay.
Thursday, and I can't tell. I'm just so thrilled. I don't know why I'm great. You know
Any assignments? Yeah. Meetings, on every one of them, Steve. You know who's on your committee?
Right.
Nathan Cowan.
Thank you.